Good morning. It is really good to be here. I've been in Hilversum several times now, 3 or 4 times, and I've experienced something today I've never experienced before. It's kind of confusing. There's this like yellow ball up in the sky, and that shines down on us, and I've never really seen one of those here, and so it was good. In fact, we were in Belfast, Northern Ireland, 2 days ago, and they had that same phenomena going on over there. And in fact, in the afternoon, it got so warm in the room that we're in because they didn't have air conditioning that I was giving a talk, and they said, you have 30 minutes to give it. And 10 minutes in, half the room was asleep. And you guys, most of you are pastors, so you understand. When the audience is done, you're done. It's great if you guys finish at the same time when you had planned, but if that's not the case and they finish before you do, you're done. And so I finished right there and said, we're through. But it's great. It really is great to be here with friends. Sebastian, we have become such good friends. We speak to each other at least once a month on a video call, and we talk on the phone, and it's a blessing to be a part of what God is doing here. And I just love these guys. I love what God is doing through them. If you've not met Ava, she may be around later. They have twin 3-year-old boys, and so that's an absolute full-time job. But she's got another job too. But Ava has Sebastian way over married. Do you have that concept here? And so I just want to say that. If you get a chance to meet Ava, she's just wonderful. And some of the staff here at Hilversum have been over at Seacoast, where we pastor, and have been to our art conferences. And it's good to see you guys. I was surprised today. Pete and Lori Ferguson, wave at us, you guys. These guys were on our staff in Charleston, South Carolina at Seacoast Church for a number of years, and then moved to serve as a civilian with the United States government in Germany. And it's kind of like they get paid by the government to support their ministry. You follow what I'm saying? I mean, they do a job for the government, but they are in full-time ministry. We're all in full-time ministry. How do you know that? We're all in whether you get paid for it or not. I told Sebastian's church this weekend, I said, we're all in full-time ministry. The only difference between Sebastian and some of you who volunteer is that he's paid to be good, you're good for nothing. And so you guys can tell your churches that. That's kind of a deal. And these guys volunteer in their church and also have a vision for Europe. So it's good to see them. I was surprised that they were here. And so many other friends that we see and we know. Why are we here? I'm going to say something to you up front that I hope I repeat again and again because you don't know why you're here. Sebastian said, hey, come, let's talk church, ARC. You don't know what ARC is. I want to say this to you. What's the catch here? We don't want anything from you. We're not going to ask for a dime from you, nor will we. We don't want anything from you. We want things for you, okay? We want things for you. And if we can be a part of God encouraging you, supplying you with what you need for ministry, we want to do that. And give you a little example, and I'm going to talk about ARC and what it means and how it came to be. But this morning, a group of us who will be speaking and sharing today, we're staying, just down the road here. We walked. That's something we don't do in America, is we use our cars in America. But we walked about a 10 or 15 minute walk here. But I told them, because I've been here before, that before we go to Thousand Hills Church, I want to take you to a bagel store, Beans and Bagel. Now, we would call it a coffee shop, but you don't do that here, as I understand. But we'll visit one of those later, maybe. I don't know, but I said they've got just great coffee and bagels and stuff. So I want you to go. And so we went and we sat around a table. And as we sat there, the conversation quickly went to, hey, how does this work in your church? What about children's ministry? How are you handling that? What about we've got an issue with student ministry. What about worship? And around the table, it just kept going back and forth and back and forth. And we're pulling out our little, our iPhones and taking notes on that, on what each other is doing. And we had questions. So I stopped them at some point and I said, guys, you know what we're doing right now? We are doing what the Ark kind of was created to do from the very beginning. It's a group of pastors who get together. We make excuses to come together. So, because how many of you know our lives are busy? And I'm so appreciative that I know your lives are so busy, and for you to take time out and drive, or some of you flew in today, or took a train, or however you got here. Your life has become so busy, but you can never be too busy for the relationships that God wants for you as pastors. We can become so isolated. We can become so alone. And we, a group of us in the U.S., decided that we are going to carve out time for relationship with one another. And so we make excuses to get together. We schedule times, and then we'll call each other and say, we got to get together, and we're going to a conference together, and we're going to spend some time. And it's the time outside of the conference that's so important. And so what we're doing today is something that we've begun to do in the United States. Is we call them all access exchanges, and we'll go to a city, and we will take 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours to talk church, to have some people say, here's kind of what is going on in our church. God seems to be blessing this. Or here's a mistake that we made. You need to learn from my experience. How many of you know it's much better to learn from other people's mistakes than it is from your own, okay? And so here's a mistake that we made. And so here's kind of what we did, and you can learn from that. And then we have a lot of Q&A, and it's basically about the local church, and hopefully it'll be a blessing. This will be just a little bit different. We'll have some of that. But here we also want to introduce you to this concept called ARC, the Association of Related Churches. I want to tell you how ARC began, and then if you so choose and so desire to form something similar here, because it's been such a blessing to us, we want to tell you what's gone on. If you so desire, we were in Belfast, and there's been a lot of groundwork laid among their leaders, and they're going to become a Belfast ARC. And like I said, it's not about money. We're not taking any money from it. It's about, can we share a concept with you that might be helpful there. We're going to China in just a couple of weeks, and they have a vision to plant 5,000 churches and come together and do it and form a similar thing that we're going to talk to you about today in Australia and various places. So let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you my story just a little bit. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, in the center of the United States, by mountains, beautiful. And my father was a preacher. My grandfather was a preacher. Before that, he was a bootlegger, which he was an outlaw and sold alcohol in the United States when it was illegal. And that's how he made his money. And he was a gunfighter and shot people and got shot. And he had just an incredible experience with God, changed his life, and he became a church planter. And so I grew up in church, did not want to be a preacher. I want to be a rock star. And that was my goal in life. And I had a band when I was a kid, and one of the guys in my band grew up to be what I wanted to be. And very, very successful. In fact, Guitar Player magazine calls him the greatest guitar player in the world. And I had him come to my church at Seacoast. He's a great Christian guy, and I had him come to my church. And so I asked him, I said, Brent, people in my church want to know just how good was I back in the day, okay? How good? And so we played together, a little song for the church. And then he said, well, he said, in the industry, he said, it's like this. He said, there are two types of musicians. There are those who have talent and those who have instruments. He said, you had instruments. And so I felt the call of God on my life to go a different direction. And became a pastor. Struggled so much in early years. Actually was fired from my first three jobs working with student ministry, and decided that's probably not what God wants me to do. And began to pastor a little bitty church in Illinois, in a farming community in the Midwest of the United States. And we kind of rode the charismatic wave of the 80s. I don't know if, that was here, or anybody knows anything about that. And church grew a little bit, and from about 13 members to about 400 members. And about 8.5 years in, I began to get just a feel and an urge that I wanted to start a church in a major city that would be a church that embraced our kind of Pentecostal roots and charismatic roots, but that would reach unchurched people. Now, there weren't really any models for that at the time. We kind of became a pioneer in that. How do you know you're a pioneer? If you turn around, you can see the arrows in your back. Okay, that's how you know who pioneers are. But we wanted to reach unchurched people. I didn't know how. I didn't know what that meant. We prayed, prayers that we wanted to reach the nations, but we couldn't even reach our neighbors. And I went into Chicago, and I stumbled into a church called Willow Creek. Has anybody ever heard of Willow Creek? Bill Hybels is the pastor. And I said, wow, they're reaching unchurched people. And so we went to the East Coast of the United States, and we started a church called Seacoast Church. And we wanted to reach unchurched people. We were excited about it. We had really a lot of people at our opening. We had 350 people at our very first service. We did some marketing and all kinds of things. And I just thought it would be great. I called one of my friends from Colorado. I said, quit your job. Come help me take care of people. This is going to grow. This is going to be exciting. And it did grow, but not the direction I thought it would. I thought we were going to have revival. We had revival, but we had what's called a Gideon revival. Are you familiar with that? That's where you have less people every week than you had the week before. How do you know that'll encourage you, And we didn't grow. I mean, we every year for 3 years, we had less people than we had the year before. It took us 5 years to even get the amount of people to come that came on the very first Sunday. We're the slowest growing megachurch in the world, okay? And people say, well, what happened? I mean, why did it take 5 years for it to begin to grow? I have a friend whose name is Lynn Sweet. He writes a lot of books. And he said in those days there were a lot of Willow Creek clones that were up a creek without a Hybels. And that's kind of, I don't know if that translates or not, but that's kind of where we were. And we finally, got to a place where we began to really embrace who we were, and God began to bless, and we learned some things, and it hasn't been just, everything wonderful every week since then, but the churches began to grow. And so it grew to be about 2,000 people in 5 services, beyond anything my wife and I could ever have imagined. And we tried to build a larger building, and our community ruled that we couldn't. And in fact, they zoned our land where we couldn't build a big building at all on it. And I didn't know what to do. I had no idea. I got discouraged, and I did what I do when I get discouraged. Is I went into my office, I turned off all the lights, and I turned on some country music. Do you guys know country music here at all? American country music? Because in country music, they always lose something. They lose their girlfriend or their dog or their truck, Now, I've heard that if you play country music backwards, they get it all back. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm sitting there, and I'm having a pity party. You know what that is? I don't want to get over it right away. I want to feel this, And it was in those moments that the Lord really spoke to me. And this has been kind of a guiding principle for ministry for me. And it was this idea of, it's real hard to surprise an omniscient God. Would you agree with that? I was totally surprised by the outcome of the vote. God wasn't. I mean, God's never had a day where he said, oh, I didn't see that coming. He's omniscient. And so here's the truth. If that's the truth, God is at work on the solution before you even know there's a problem. And some of you need that today. That's a word that you need today. There's a problem in your ministry right now. There's a problem in your church. It might be with people who are working with you, or there's a problem in your family, or you just have a feeling that a problem's coming. Well, how many of you know a problem is going to come? That's where we live. We live from one problem to the next, but we live on the promises of Jesus, not the problems. But God is at work on the solution before you even know there's a problem. And so the quicker you get onto the solution side, the better off it is for everybody. And so out of that problem came a concept called multi-site. Didn't exist at the time. We had to figure out, how do you have church? How do you have church without building bigger buildings and killing everybody with too many services? And so we started doing church in multiple locations. And there were 4, 5, 6 of us churches that said, let's figure this out. And so now I would argue that what we thought was our biggest failure, the inability to build a bigger building, became the biggest blessing to the body of Christ in the world that we will ever be. And we could never have thought of that ourselves. And so God figured that out. So about the same time, I'm a church planter. And I always wanted to plant churches, but we weren't successful at it. We had planted 3 churches out of Seacoast Church, and each of them had failed. And the last one failed with a lot of money. We weren't a huge church. I mean, a fairly large church, but we didn't have a big budget. And we had put $100,000 into our 3rd church. And 1 year later, the pastor had a moral failure. I had to go to California, where we opened up the church, and close the church down, and with nothing to show for it. Had to come back to our board and say, we have nothing. But I had this dream and this vision to plant churches. A man came into my life named Billy Hornsby. He was on staff at a church in Louisiana, and he came and spoke for us, and we went golfing one day. And during the whole golf match, he was interviewing me, and it was really weird. I didn't understand, why is this man interviewing me? I don't want another job. I don't know what's going on. I hardly know him. But finally, toward the end of the golf match, he said, "What's the dream in your heart?" And I said, well, I didn't really want to tell him, because it was a failed dream. I said, well, honestly, I'd love to plant 2,000 churches in my lifetime. Why plant churches? I'm going to give you just about a 15-minute talk a little bit later today on why. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. I know you guys understand, but some things that have really resonated in me and why we need to plant churches. But I said I feel like God's called us to plant 2,000 churches, and we've planted 3, and it's not going well. And he said, well, I know how to create organizations. Why don't we come together and let's do this together? And so Billy came on staff with us, and he immediately introduced me to 2 or 3 of his friends. And we began to hang out together, because I think ministry grows out of relationship. And we began to hang out together, and then one of them, who is his son-in-law actually, Chris Hodges, said to me, he said, I'd like to plant a church in Birmingham, Alabama. And I said, well, I'd like to help you. We haven't done real well, but let's figure this out together. And so what happened is Seacoast Church gave Chris Hodges money. The amount is irrelevant. I mean, it's different for everybody, but it was $25,000 to help get the church started. And then I said, let's make a budget for you. And every month that you don't make enough money to reach that budget, Seacoast Church will make up the difference. You understand what I'm saying? And here's the only caveat, is when you do reach budget, you need to give 10% at least of everything that comes in to missions. And the first mission will be to pay back the money that we gave you. Only we don't necessarily want you to pay it back to us. How about we pay it into a fund so that we can use that fund to plant another church? And he said, okay, we'll do that. Well, his friend heard that and called me right away. And he said, it's wonderful what you're doing for Chris. I want to plant a church too on the same day. Could you do that for me? And I said, yes. And I went back to our board and I said, I know we don't have the money, but I just committed some money. Have you ever done that? And I said, let's raise money. Made the same deal with him and said, when you reach budget, pay it back. You don't have to pay it to Seacoast, but pay it back into a fund. And then we'll use that fund to plant more churches. And then we got 5 of us together, 6 of us, I guess, in that first gathering. And we said, what if we did this? What if we formed a church planting cooperative where that we plant churches, and let's have these be the first 2. And let's have that church planting cooperative be built on covenant relationships. We've been hanging around a while, and I know in church world, relationships last for a while with some people, and then you go different ways and things happen. What if we modeled covenant relationships? I'm committed to you for a lifetime. I'm going to love you I'm going to have your back for a lifetime. Because we need each other. We need relationships. We're lonely in ministry, to be honest with you. We need people around us who understand. And so we made that covenant with one another. And then we said, okay, let's do this. If church planting is as important as we think it is, let's commit to give a portion of our budget to this fund to plant churches. And we decided that number would be 2%. 2% of our budget, or if we give 10% to missions, it'll be 20% of our missions giving. Will be toward planting new churches. And we'll put it into this fund, and then as we plant churches, this fund will grow, and we'll loan the money to a church, and they can pay it back with no interest. But if we do that, then they will give also, as a part of their budget, 2% into this fund. And so that's how we began the Ark. And then we will meet together on regular times in order to encourage each other and love each other. And then as it began to grow, we began to see, well, we need to train people better. And so we began to train and learn how to train and pick the right people and know what to look for and give them the right training. In fact, I've got some of our staff here that we'll introduce as the day goes on. Michael Smith, who runs all of the kind of the training and the operations of the Ark in the United States, and David Branker, who you'll meet in a few minutes, who is just a brilliant mind also, who is now our international global director, and some of our other friends who are our church planters and pastors. But I said, so we said, let's do this and let's see what happens. And so that first year, we planted 2 churches. 2 churches. Those 2 churches, God blessed. They're not normal. How do you know, you see the story of the 1 talent guy, the 2 talent guy, and the 5 talent guy. I'm just going to tell you, I am not a 5 talent guy. 5 talent guys irritate me because everything's easy for them. You know that? They just have vision and it happens. I have to pray and pray and pray and then it doesn't work half the time, and then I work hard and work hard. My life verse is Galatians 6:9. Don't be weary in doing good, for in due season you will reap a harvest if you don't quit. And in that verse, it's my life verse. Everybody on my staff goes, oh, here goes Greg again with his verse. It says that I have a couple of responsibilities and God has a couple of responsibilities. My responsibility is to do good and make good repeatable, right? Figure out what is good, and making it repeatable is figuring out systems of how I can in my own personal life and in my church, how I can do good and make it repeatable. And the other responsibility I have is not to quit. Okay, so do good every day, learn how to make it repeatable, and not quit. God's responsibility is the harvest and the size of the harvest. And he says if I'll do my part, he guarantees that the harvest is coming. Okay? Now, when I try to do God's part, I get frustrated. You know, Jesus said, I will build my church. Jesus told me, make disciples. My part is to make disciples. His part is to build the church. When I start trying to build the church, I get frustrated. But if I will make disciples, he'll do his part. He'll build the church. And so So I'm about a 2 talent. I probably am a 1 talent, but I'm about a 2, I think. And 2 talents, we need to affirm 5 talent people, celebrate them, not get jealous of them, know they're a part of the kingdom of God. I can give you some names of 5 talent people. Chris Hodges is a 5 talent person. Stephen Furtick is a friend of mine. He's a 5 talent person. I don't know if you've heard of Stephen. There's lots of them. There's lots of them I could mention. But most of us are 1 or 2 talent people, and we just do as best we can and keep doing it. And so those first 2 churches that we planted were 5 talent people. And they grew huge. I mean, Chris Hodges' church is 30,000 people today. Rick Bazette's is 15,000 people today. And but they paid back their loan within 6 months into that fund and began to pay 2% of that fund, and the other 3 of us began to pay 2% of that fund, and it grew. And so we planted 2 churches that first year. And the second year we planted 3. And then the next year we planted 3. And then the next year we planted 9. We planted 9 churches the next year. And it began to grow and grow and grow. Today, and I'll quit my talk here in just a second. Today, ARC has planted 360 churches. Now listen to this. Last year, we planted 65 or 67, something like that. How many is it last year? 65. We planted. I will tell you what I think. Michael will tell you the truth. Okay, so he'll get up. I speak evangelistically through faith, and Michael will tell you the truth. How many of you know you need truth tellers? I'm married to one. I'm married to a truth teller. People always say, there's a man that speaks into my life, and he'll say, Greg, how are you? And I'll go, great, it's good. And then he'll turn to Debbie and say, how are things really? Okay? And she'll say. But 65 churches last year. This year we're going to plant 100. Okay? Those 65 churches last year, on opening day, they had over 760 people come to know Jesus. On opening day, 760. Now listen to this one. Last year, the ARC churches that we have planted, 360 of them, gave over $11 million to world mission. $11 million to world mission. Now here's what I do. And some people say, well, 2%, that's a lot of money to put into a fund to plant churches. No, it's a little bit. What I do is I go back to my church, and I do this regularly. I used to just do it once a year. Now I do it about every 2 months. Is I get up and I tell them those statistics. I say, you know what? This year, Seacoast Church planted 65 churches, and they cheer. This year, Seacoast Church gave over $11 million to world missions through these churches, and they cheer. And the people who are business people in my church, they go, the ROI on that is unbelievable. You mean, and I tell them, I say, if you give $100 to our church, we use offering boxes. If you put $100 in that offering box, I will guarantee you $2 will go towards planting churches. And 2 of those dollars will produce that kind of a return. And the people go, wow, that's the greatest return. God and Sons have been in business for a long time. And their investment program is incredibly good. Much better than, I checked the U.S. stock market today, and it's going like this. God's always goes like this. Goes like this. And so it's been an incredible, incredible, incredible journey. And we'll continue to plant churches. And now we feel like we want to share what God has given us with the world. And what that means is that there will be groups of people in various parts of the world who will say, you know what, we want to do that. And they'll keep their money in their part of the world where they're at. We don't want, Dutch money in the United States. Okay, it just doesn't spin very well. I go places and they go, what's a euro? We don't want that. We don't want that. That's not what we're asking for. We're not asking for anything. We're just saying, here's what we're doing. If you guys can learn from this and it can be replicable, then hey, let's let you coach. Let us coach on it. We have training that we've developed that we think can help you learn from our mistakes. And so what we have, we give you. We don't want anything from you. We're looking to invest in you, and we want what we can do for you. And so that's kind of the story of the ARC. and there's probably much more to it, but it's about planting churches, and it's about covenant relationships. I had a man come to me the other day. We were just talking about this morning. Pastor of a larger church in America came to me a couple of years ago, and he said, "Greg, are you lonely? Let's be honest. Are you lonely? Because it's a lonely place. I mean, before I became a pastor, I had these visions of how wonderful it would be to be a shepherd. I mean, sheep. I used to get gifts of little toy sheep. I used to sleep with a sheep, just fluffy, and they're just great. And I'm going to be able to be a shepherd of sheep. And I became a shepherd, and I found out that sheep bite. Some of them have a taste for shepherd. And some of them are rabid. And the higher up you go on the ladder, the higher the levels, the more devils. I'm not talking about people in church. I was talking about people in the church, but right now, I'm talking about the enemy. I wanted to make a transition there, okay? And it can get real lonely. You guys know that. You can have vision and all of this, and it can get lonely. And this man came to me and he said, "Are you lonely, Large Church?" And I said to him, "I used to be, but I'm not anymore. I have covenant relationships with a group of guys who are on mission together to plant churches, and it's incredible." And so I guess I'm kind of like I said I'm going to close 3 times. That doesn't mean anything as a preacher, but we're kind of like you remember the lepers who, when Jerusalem was surrounded by a siege, and the lepers went and they found out that God had already won the victory, and they went in and they're eating and all of this kind of stuff. And one of them looks to the other one and he says, "We really ought to go tell other people this isn't right that we enjoy this to ourselves." That's what we're here for. We're just one leper trying to help another one and saying there's good stuff. And if we can share anything that we have, we want to give it to you.